It's not an easy task to say precisely what the subject of this seminar will be, because what I'm about to explore is so basic, so deeply woven into the roots of our understanding, that to give it a simple title would almost miss the point. Essentially, I'm going to speak about what is about existence itself. Before we can move into that, we need to set a kind of background, to look briefly at the foundations of our ordinary Western sense of reality, the ideas that quietly govern the way we perceive the world, that shape our logic, our everyday assumptions, and even our language. These patterns of thought are so deeply ingrained that most people are unaware of their influence. They lie beneath our common sense like invisible roots beneath a forest floor. And these inherited patterns, the way we think about being, time, self, and the world, come from ancient stories and philosophies that still echo through our civilization today. I call these deep frameworks myths. Not myth in the shallow sense of something false, but myth as a profound metaphor, an image or narrative through which human beings attempt to make sense of existence. For instance, when we try to explain something we don't fully grasp, we naturally reach for analogy. If you were to describe electricity to someone completely unfamiliar with it, you might say it behaves like water. We speak of an electric current. That word, current, comes directly from the movement of rivers. Electricity, of course, is not water, but there are enough similarities to make the comparison meaningful. In this way, metaphors become our bridges of understanding. Astronomers use a similar method when they talk about the expanding universe. They might say, imagine a dark balloon with white dots on its surface, each dot representing a galaxy. As the balloon expands, the dots move farther apart. That image gives us an idea of cosmic expansion, even though the universe itself is not literally a balloon. These are examples of how we use symbolic models, myths, to grasp what cannot be directly seen. And right now, in our modern civilization, we live under the influence of two immensely powerful myths. They have shaped science, religion, politics, and psychology. But both are incomplete. Both are out of date. So the task before us, and the purpose of this conversation, is to imagine a new, more adequate image of reality, one that not only fits our best understanding of the universe, but also resonates with the way we feel as living beings within it. Because an image of the world that doesn't harmonize with our direct experience leaves us alienated, confused, and spiritually unsatisfied. Now, the two dominant myths that have guided Western thought for about 2,000 years, and perhaps longer, are what I will call the ceramic model and the fully automatic model. The ceramic model comes directly from the book of Genesis, the foundational story of the world as a divine artifact, something made by an external craftsman. From that myth, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam derive their basic picture of existence. In that story, God is portrayed as a master potter, fashioning form out of formless matter, a divine technician, an architect who conceives the universe as a potter shapes clay into vessels, or as a carpenter constructs a table from wood. And so in this image, the universe is an object, a manufactured thing. Matter is treated as raw material, inert, unintelligent, passive, awaiting the imprint of divine will. In Genesis, the Lord forms Adam from the dust of the earth, breathes life into him, and the clay figure awakens. The implication is that matter by itself is lifeless and requires an external intelligence to give it meaning and motion. From this story, we inherit the notion that the universe is fundamentally made, that we ourselves are created objects, fashioned by an external maker. It's perfectly natural then in our culture for a child to ask, "Who made me?" or "How was I made?" Because for us, existence begins as a product, as something assembled by a divine craftsman. But not all cultures share this view. A Chinese child, for instance, wouldn't typically ask, "Who made me?" They would ask, "How did I grow?" And that subtle difference reveals a completely different way of understanding life. To make something is to assemble it from the outside in, as a potter shapes clay or a sculptor carves stone. But to grow something is the opposite. It unfolds from within, like a flower opening its petals, or an embryo developing into a living being. Growth happens all over itself at once as inner intelligence expresses itself outwardly. Our ancient story, however, treats the world as an artifact, as if trees, mountains, and rivers were constructed things, much like tables, houses, or machines. And because of that, we've imagined a deep division between the maker and the made, between the creator and the creation. This view, the ceramic model, was born in societies ruled by monarchs. Naturally, their gods were imagined as kings, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the supreme ruler seated upon a cosmic throne. And so, people came to see reality itself as a kind of divine monarchy, with subjects below and a sovereign above. Even today, in republics like the United States, we still unconsciously cling to that monarchical image of the universe. We kneel, we bow, we praise the Lord as subjects before a throne, a symbolic echo of ancient political order. In such a worldview, the ultimate power of existence is something external, something to be feared and obeyed. Historically, this has colored everything, even our architecture and our rituals. The great cathedrals of Europe, for example, are modeled after royal courts. The altar stands like a throne, and the priest, facing it, serves as the divine minister. People kneel before it as subjects before their king. Even the word basilica means house of the king. Protestant churches, though less ornate, still reflect similar ideas, with pulpits elevated like judges' benches and congregants seated in pews as if in court. Our God became both monarch and magistrate, and life itself a kind of trial. In the monarchic view of the cosmos, the maker of the universe is seen as the ultimate ruler, the celestial sovereign who governs all things from above, and because of that, people have long felt themselves as subjects before a throne, humble, obedient, and at a fundamental distance from whatever force brought this vast mechanism into motion. It is curious, isn't it, that citizens of a republic still think in terms of a royal universe? We've carried forward the image of the divine monarch from the ancient Near Eastern world, where kings ruled absolutely, and the cosmos itself was thought to mirror that same structure. In those times, to approach God meant to bow, to kneel, to avert your eyes, for before such power one must be lowly. And this posture of the spirit remains deeply ingrained. It stems from fear, the fear of power, the fear of divine authority, for in every tyranny, the ruler is most afraid of his own subjects. That is why kings demand that others bow. When you are lying prostrate, you cannot strike back. And so even in our architecture, our worship, our very sense of the sacred, we've encoded this fear into form. Walk into a great cathedral and you will see it. The altar stands at the far end, set against the eastern wall, the symbolic throne of God. The priest faces it, acting as the royal intermediary, while the congregation kneels in reverence. A basilica, that great word from Greek basileus meaning king, is literally the house of a sovereign. Even in Protestant churches, the courtroom replaces the court of a king. The pulpit becomes the judge's bench. The minister wears the black robe of authority, as does a judge in an American courtroom. The people sit in their designated boxes, pews arranged like jury seats, and the whole scene echoes our ancient notion of life as trial and judgment. In both settings, whether the throne or the bench, the underlying myth remains the same. The world is ruled by a transcendent authority, and we are the defendants of existence. But this worldview, powerful as it once was, has its limits. Its very structure depends on a division between the maker and the made, the spirit and the material, the ruler and the ruled, and that division no longer holds up. You see, science long ago stopped asking, what is matter? That question, once central to philosophy, became increasingly meaningless, because every time we try to define what matter is, we end up describing what it does. We can only talk about patterns of behavior, about movement, relationships, and form. If you look closely at a stone, for instance, you might think of it as a solid block of stuff, but under a microscope, you'll find a dance of patterns, crystals, lattices, vibrations. Zoom in further, and you find molecules. Deeper still, atoms. And beyond them, electrons, quarks, waves of energy, each layer more abstract, more relational, more elusive. You never arrive at the basic substance because there isn't one. Stuff is simply what the world looks like when our eyes are out of focus. It's a kind of conceptual blur, an artifact of limited perception. As our focus sharpens, form replaces substance. We see that what exists is not a solid mass, but an ongoing process, a patterned movement, a relationship of forces. There is no ultimate clay behind the pot, no base material behind the dance. There is only the dance itself. And so the picture of the universe offered by modern physics is not one of molded substance, but a flowing pattern, a self-moving, self-designing harmony of energy and form, a dance without a dancer, an art without an artist. Yet our common sense hasn't quite caught up with that insight. We still speak as though we live in a world of things, objects with fixed boundaries, a universe assembled like machinery. In time, this ancient image, the ceramic model, gave way to its successor, what I call the fully automatic model. Western science emerged from the old religious view, inheriting its structure while discarding its deity. Where once there was the potter who shaped the clay, now there remained only the clay itself, still obedient, still following laws, but with no potter in sight. The early scientists kept the notion of law but abandoned the lawmaker. They imagined the universe as a mechanism, a grand clock set into motion, running on mathematical precision. Newton's cosmos was a billiard table of atoms, each ball striking another according to strict necessity. Reality was motion without meaning, energy without intelligence. And so we inherited a new myth, the universe as a vast self-operating machine, utterly devoid of consciousness or purpose. It ticks along, automatic and indifferent, while we, small, accidental observers, find ourselves trapped within its gears. This vision, too, has shaped the modern mind. And while it freed us from fear of divine authority, it left us alienated from the living world. Because if the cosmos is nothing but blind mechanism, then we ourselves are accidents, flukes of matter, temporary sparks in an indifferent void. And this is the myth that quietly rules our age. In this new vision, the laws of nature replace the decrees of God. Everything moved in precise patterns, and each event unfolded according to an impersonal design. No hand guided it, no intelligence supervised it, and yet it functioned perfectly. This was the triumph of mechanism, a view of the world as an immense self-sustaining apparatus, composed of countless parts moving in mathematical harmony. The cosmos became a grand machine, and human beings were its smaller, more complex cogs. Isaac Newton, that great architect of this worldview, imagined the world as an assembly of particles, tiny billiard balls colliding in endless motion, each obeying immutable laws of force and inertia. Everything, from the planets to the pulse of the heart, could be explained in terms of cause and effect. And so the universe no longer required a divine craftsman. It could run by itself and automatically, hence the fully automatic model. At first this seemed liberating. The world once ruled by celestial authority was now open to investigation, to human understanding. But this freedom carried a hidden cost, for when the lawmaker was removed, the meaning went with him. If everything is governed by impersonal law, then purpose, value, and spirit become illusions, inventions of the mind, and what remains is energy, blind, mechanical, unfeeling. Reality, stripped of its mystery, became a machine grinding forward through empty time. Philosophers and scientists of the 19th century took this to its extreme. They declared that the universe was composed solely of matter and motion, that consciousness itself was an accidental byproduct of electrical discharges in the brain. The poets of this age lamented it, the mystics resisted it, but the academies embraced it as truth. And so the modern myth was born, that life has no ultimate direction, that human beings are clever animals fighting to survive on a meaningless rock floating through infinite darkness. Even psychology following Freud reflected this reduction. Freud spoke of libido, a blind, instinctual drive, as the core energy of the psyche. He saw human passion not as divine fire, but as the animal engine of survival and reproduction. And in this picture, reason, morality, and love were nothing but evolutionary side effects, accidents of biology. Human culture, language, art, and ethics became flukes of chemistry, temporary shapes in a sea of blind energy. In this worldview, we are cosmic accidents, brief flashes between the void and the void. Our existence is a coincidence, a statistical anomaly that will soon vanish. Now imagine the psychological weight of that myth. If you truly believe that the entire cosmos is a mindless machine, that your consciousness is merely an echo of chemical reactions, that nothing, absolutely nothing, has inherent meaning, then every act of love, every tear, every song, would ultimately be noise in an indifferent system. And yet, this is what we've been taught to call realism. We praise it as mature, intellectual, sophisticated. To believe otherwise, to believe in mystery or divine order, is dismissed as naive. But beneath this mechanical certainty, there grows a silent anxiety, the sense that something essential has been lost, because a world that runs automatically leaves no room for belonging. It leaves us homeless, in our own universe. We begin to feel like strangers in creation, like minds trapped inside alien machines, watching nature as something out there, something to study, manipulate, and control. And so the war began, the conflict between humanity and nature. We called it progress, science, conquest. We set out to master the very earth that birthed us. We built rockets to escape it, and bulldozers to remake it. The rocket and the machine became the twin symbols of modern civilization's pride and its loneliness. The irony is profound. In freeing ourselves from divine tyranny, we created another kind of bondage, a cosmic isolation, in which we no longer know who we are or why we exist. Because if the world is merely automatic, then you and I are just mechanisms, and a mechanism cannot love. It cannot pray or dream or despair. It simply runs until it stops. That is the myth we live by today, the myth of the machine, the fully automatic universe. And although it wears the costume of reason, it is in truth just another story, a story that has hypnotized the modern mind. Now, as time went on, the fully automatic model began to reveal its cracks. The more deeply science explored, the more it discovered that the universe was far less like a machine and far more like a living process. The ancient idea of matter as dead, inert stuff started to fall apart. The closer physicists looked, the less substance they found. Atoms dissolved into fields of probability, particles appeared and vanished like thoughts, and energy pulsed in rhythms that could not be predicted or controlled. The universe began to look less like a mechanism and more like a dance, a self-moving, self-organizing pattern of unimaginable intelligence. But our everyday thinking hasn't caught up with that insight. Most people still imagine themselves as isolated beings living inside bodies, separate from the environment around them. We speak as if we were dropped into the world from somewhere else. I came into this world, we say. But that's not true. You didn't come into this world. You came out of it. Just as an apple grows from an apple tree, the human being grows from the universe. The tree apples, the world peoples, and you are one of its expressions, a living gesture of the cosmos, a ripple in the great unfolding. But our inherited myths, both the ceramic and the automatic, have trained us to forget this. We've been conditioned to feel like strangers in the very reality that sustains us, and so our language reveals the illusion. We talk about facing reality as though it were a foreign thing outside ourselves. We speak of encounters with the world as if we were meeting something alien. The truth is the opposite. You are not confronting the universe. You are the universe in the form of a human being, momentarily aware of itself. But because of these inherited myths, we've learned to feel imprisoned inside our skin, as though the body were a barrier rather than a bridge. We imagine consciousness as a ghost locked in a machine, a watcher behind the eyes, a small, frightened spark trapped inside a fragile shell. And with that comes fear. The fear of death, the fear of loss, the fear that when this body stops, we vanish forever. We say, I was born, and I will die, as if existence were a short line between two voids. But this is only a trick of perception. It's like seeing a wave rise and fall and imagining that it begins at the crest and ends at the foam. In truth, the wave is the ocean playing with itself. The rise and fall are the movement of the sea. You are that sea, the total energy of the cosmos momentarily forming the pattern called you. When the form dissolves, nothing is lost. The ocean continues and new waves take shape. But the myths of separation make this hard to feel. They convince us that we are isolated egos, that life is something we've been given, rather than something we are. And because of that, we've grown hostile to nature, suspicious of our own instincts, and anxious about our place in the universe. We talk of conquering space as if space were an enemy. We speak of fighting disease and battling nature and overcoming the elements. Our entire language of progress is the language of war, a war against the very world we come from. But nature is not an opponent. It is your own body in a larger form. To fight it is to fight yourself. The air that moves through your lungs is the breath of the planet. The blood in your veins is the tide of ancient oceans. The carbon in your bones was forged in the hearts of long-dead stars. You are not apart from the universe. You are a continuation of it. So the great task before us is not to conquer the world, but to recognize ourselves as the world, to awaken from the myth of isolation, and remember that we are the cosmic process aware of itself. But to do that, we must begin by letting go of the illusion that there are such things as separate things. Because the idea of distinct independent objects is itself only a trick of speech. In nature there are no nouns, only verbs, no things, only happenings, no forms, only movements. Ask yourself, what do we mean when we say a thing? We mean something that can be named, something that can be isolated and defined. But the moment you try to define a thing, you separate it from its context, and in doing so, you lose what it really is. A cloud is not separate from the sky. A wave is not separate from the ocean. A leaf is not separate from the tree. And you are not separate from the universe. Our words divide what reality unites, and that is why language, as beautiful as it is, can never fully express the truth of existence. Because life is not made up of parts. It's one unbroken motion, a seamless flow without beginning or end. When we try to chop it into pieces to measure or control it, we create the illusion of separateness. But in truth, there is only the whole, the infinite dance of being. When you truly look at the world, you'll notice it never arrives in parts. It is always one continuous movement, flowing, shifting, transforming. We may divide it in thought, but reality itself resists division. Look at the sea. You can point to a wave, but you can't separate it from the ocean. The wave is simply the ocean waving. The boundaries we see are conceptual, lines drawn by the mind, not the world. Everything, when examined closely, is woven into everything else. The mountains and the rivers, the clouds and the trees, the wind and your breath, all part of a single unfolding motion. But we humans, with our marvelous and dangerous talent for language, try to freeze that movement into words. We create nouns to capture what's flowing. We say river, as if the river were a solid thing, when in truth, it's a verb, rivering. We say cloud, as if it stood still. But a cloud is never the same from one moment to the next. It is condensation and evaporation, an endless transformation of vapor and light. Everything you can name is already changing as you name it. Our words are nets we cast over the living world. They help us catch reality, to hold it for a while, but they also tangle it, distort it, limit it. They make us believe in separateness, in things that can be counted and owned. Imagine you're trying to grasp something that moves, Omar, like a fish in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the more it slips away. So you invent a net, something regular, with holes. You can then measure the holes, count the knots, and describe where everything fits. That net is the human mind. It allows us to map the dance of reality, to study, to predict, to build civilizations. But it's still only a net. It never touches the living fluid of what's really there. Our mathematics, our logic, our categories, these are the meshes of the net. And while they help us navigate existence, they can never be existence itself. When we forget that, when we confuse the map for the territory, we begin to mistake our abstractions for life. We say, this is matter, or that is spirit, as though those were fixed realities. But what we're really describing are patterns of motion, ripples within the same vast process. So remember, there are no truly separate events, no isolated things. There are only relationships and interwoven movements, endlessly defining and creating one another. A person cannot be understood apart from the world any more than a flame can be understood apart from fire. To describe a dancer, you must also describe the dance. To describe a bird, you must also describe the sky. To describe yourself, you must also describe everything that sustains you. You are the pattern the universe is currently performing in human form. You are not a stranger to existence. You are existence, momentarily aware of itself. When we try to control the world, to measure, to categorize, to command, we are simply tightening the net. And every time we tighten it, the real fluid nature of life slips through the holes, reminding us that the living cannot be caged by concept. Reality is wiggly, alive, dynamic, fluid. Straight lines are the invention of human eyes and rulers. Nature curves, breathes, oscillates. Look at the horizon, the coastlines, the branches of trees, the flow of water, the movement of clouds. There are no straight lines in any of them. Even you, sitting in a room full of right angles and walls, are made of the same cosmic wiggle, the pulse of galaxies, the rhythm of atoms, the flow of breath. You are the universe in motion, shaped for a moment into human form. The tragedy of our modern myth is that we've tried to straighten what is curved, to fix what is alive, to control what is wild. But the more we fight the flow, the more alienated we become. And the more alienated we become, the more we suffer. So the invitation really is not to control the wiggle, but to move with it. to let the dance lead you, to recognize that the same pattern that forms the galaxies also beats within your heart, that what you call self is a note in the same cosmic melody. When this becomes more than an idea, when it becomes a felt realization, the boundary between you and everything else begins to dissolve, and in that dissolution there is no loss, only liberation, because the truth is that you were never separate to begin with. If you look closely enough, you'll see that nothing stands alone. Every being, every motion, every breath is woven into everything else. To imagine a separate self is like trying to imagine a wave apart from the sea. A wave has a distinct shape, yes, but it's never independent. It's the ocean expressing itself in a certain pattern, for a certain moment, and when the pattern changes, the ocean hasn't lost anything, it simply takes another form. So it is with you. You are the universe moving as a human being, the great flow of existence caught in a particular rhythm of thought, skin, and bone. You are not inside the world. You are the world, performing itself as consciousness in motion. Think of a whirlpool in a river. You can see it, it has form and movement, you can even give it a name. But no single drop of water stays there. The whirlpool is made entirely of flow, a pattern the river is performing. When the water moves differently, the whirlpool disappears. Has it died? Not at all. The river is still there, simply expressing itself in another shape. The whirlpool was never a thing, only a doing. And so are you. Your body, your memories, your identity, all of it is a continuous pattern of motion within the greater stream of being. New energy flows in every second. Air, sunlight, food, thought. The molecules that make you are borrowed, not owned. You are the motion of the cosmos taking this temporary form. You and the world form one process, the way a flame and the fire are one event. There isn't a flame in the fire. The flame is the fire, shaped for a moment by air and fuel. Likewise, there isn't a you in the universe. There is only the universe, flowing as you. When we truly sense this, the illusion of separation begins to fade. We stop feeling like small creatures trapped in a vast, indifferent space, and begin to recognize that space itself is our body expanded. Every atom in you was born in the explosion of ancient stars. You are the continuation of that original brilliance, the Big Bang still unfolding, still echoing, still singing itself into form. But our conditioning blinds us to this. The myths we've inherited taught us to think of ourselves as manufactured, as souls inserted into machines of flesh. We learned to say, I have a body, when the truth is that you are a body, and that body is the universe breathing, eating, thinking, dreaming. When this recognition deepens, something extraordinary happens. Fear begins to dissolve, because the self you thought could die was never truly separate from what cannot die. You are as ancient as time, as vast as space, and as intimate as the breath you're taking right now. And once that becomes clear, you start to see others differently too. Every face, every creature, every leaf is another expression of the same living reality. The boundary between me and you, self and other, starts to blur like waves merging in the sea. That's what true compassion is, not pity, not duty, but the recognition that the same life looks out through countless eyes. When I meet you, I'm meeting another version of myself, another face of the infinite. And when you smile, it's the universe remembering itself. In that sense, there is no true isolation, no permanent loss, no real conflict between humanity and nature. All opposites, birth and death, joy and sorrow, growth and decay, are waves of the same ocean. They rise and fall together, each giving meaning to the other. To understand this isn't to escape life, it's to live it more fully. It's to realize that the dance of existence isn't something happening to you. It's happening as you. You are the rhythm, the movement, the stillness between each breath. And when that insight takes root, everything changes. You no longer feel the need to resist the current. You begin to move with it, to trust it, to let it carry you home. When you begin to feel that the self and the world are not two, that your being is inseparable from all that exists, the ancient tension between opposites starts to fade. Life and death, gain and loss, joy and sorrow, these cease to be enemies and become movements of the same rhythm. We were taught to believe that life is a possession, something given and later taken away. But life is not something you have, it's something you are. The very motion of existence itself. It cannot be separated from its background any more than sound can be separated from silence or light from shadow. Death, then, is not the opposite of life, but the counterpart that gives it shape. The tide cannot rise without falling. The inhale cannot exist without the exhale. So life and death are not two events but one process, the universe breathing in and out through the forms it takes. Our fear of death comes from identifying with the transient shape instead of the living pattern that animates it. We forget that the same energy that births the flower also takes it back into the soil. What dies is not life itself, only its temporary expression. In truth, there was never a time when you began. There will never be a moment when you end. You are the continuous unfolding of the cosmos, appearing now as a person, just as it once appeared as stars, and will again as something new. Spirit and matter, too, are not separate. They are two words for one event, the invisible and the visible, the dancer and the dance. To divide them is only a habit of language, not a truth of experience. The same force that burns in the sun is what lights the thought behind your eyes. The same pulse that drives the galaxies is what moves your heartbeat and your breath. There is no border between the sacred and the ordinary. Every leaf, every moment, every sigh is holy. Once this is felt, not as an idea but as reality, you stop chasing eternity as something beyond this world. You see that eternity is not endless time. It is the timeless dimension of this very moment. Right now, as you breathe, you are the eternal universe aware of itself. That awareness has always been here, watching through every form, feeling through every life. It never began because it was never absent. It never ends because it's never separate. And this realization dissolves anxiety. You no longer need to fight life or resist change because change is the movement of what you are. You begin to see that everything you feared losing was never apart from you to begin with. When the river turns, the water that moves away is still the same river flowing on. When your body transforms, the consciousness that moves through it simply finds another way to sing. There is in truth nothing to hold on to and nothing to lose. Because you are not in life, you are life itself. When you see that, the weight of fear drops away like an old garment. The struggle to control fades into play. Existence ceases to be a problem to solve and becomes a mystery to participate in. And that is freedom. Not escape from the world, but unity with it. Not rising above the dance, but realizing you are the dance. The infinite motion of being turning and returning in joy. You were never thrown into this world. You grew out of it. You are not a stranger here. You are the very movement of the earth and stars, breathing and thinking in human form. And so the universe is not a machine, not a product built by an external mind, but a living organism, a boundless field of intelligence playing with itself in endless variety. You are one of those plays, a ripple of awareness through which the cosmos contemplates its own beauty. The eyes through which you see the world are the universe looking back at itself. The ears through which you hear are the cosmos listening to its own song. To know this is to be free, not free from life, but free as life. The chains of fear fall away because the you who was afraid is seen to be only a mask, a temporary wave of the infinite. Behind that mask, the ocean of consciousness remains untouched. This is not an idea to believe in. It is something to awaken to, a shift from thinking to seeing, from resisting to realizing. When you awaken in this way, the world no longer appears as something out there. It becomes a mirror, endlessly reflecting the same light through countless forms. And you begin to sense a quiet laughter running through all things, the laughter of the universe enjoying its own game. The mountains, the rivers, the people you love, the mistakes you've made, the pain you've endured, all of it belongs. All of it is sacred. Nothing was ever wasted. Nothing was ever outside the whole. The idea that the cosmos is blind, mechanical, and meaningless turns out to be one of the greatest myths of all. It was simply another mask worn by the eternal to hide from itself. Because even in the depths of confusion, the universe has never stopped being what it is, a celebration of pure existence. And that perhaps is what we mean when we speak of God. Not an external ruler watching from afar, but the infinite process of reality itself, unfolding through stars and cells in human hearts. When you finally feel this, when it moves from concept to experience, you stop asking, what is the meaning of life? Because you see that life is meaning. There is no question left to answer. There is only participation, the dance of awareness, knowing itself as everything. You look around and realize that what you once called the world has never been anything but you, and that the self you once defended so fiercely was never truly confined to your skin. You were never merely a person. You were and always will be the total event, the great happening of existence expressing itself in infinite forms. And so the final understanding is not found in words or theories, but in silence, the silence that listens before thought, the stillness that breathes through every sound. In that silence, all opposites dissolve, and what remains is only presence, the timeless awareness that you have always been. This is the end of seeking, the return to the beginning that never began, the moment when the wave realizes it is the ocean, and the dreamer awakens to find that the dream was never separate. And in that recognition, everything, even the smallest thing, becomes luminous. Every leaf, every heartbeat, every breath is the universe whispering, "I am here." So perhaps in the end, the most honest title for this talk is still the simplest one: what there is. Not what should be, not what might be, but what has always been, what is now, and what will forever be, the living mystery of being itself.